So yeah, this evening I'm going to be singing a lot of ballads for you. I'm going to be asking you to sing along with me on some of these because some ballads are meant to be sung together. Yeah, and I want to go ahead and say thank you in the sense that this is a song tradition that, in many ways, I don't think is endangered. It continues to be popular, at least in niche ways. People really love these songs and are really touched by them. People continue to sing them, but at the same time, we're living in a culture that has a shorter and shorter attention span, right? And these songs were the form of entertainment in the day, right? This is what you were sitting around the fire listening to, and they were meant to be long. They were meant to take a while to listen to. They are meant to be repetitive in a way that in our culture we're not quite used to these days. And so appreciating these songs takes something that some mentors of mine would call deep listening, right? It means being really active as a listener, and if you're singing too, like as a singer in the song, and placing yourself in the story and wanting to be in the story and imagining what's happening. So it takes a certain kind of presence and patience, and I thank you for being willing to be a part of that process with these songs. So I'm going to start with a really old song that has its origins in the 13th century. This is a story about a man, a real historical figure named Thomas Eildon, or Thomas of Ercildoune. He lived in the Scottish borders in the 1200s. He was a laird, Laird, and during his lifetime, he gained a reputation as a seer and a prophet. He became very famous. And so after he died, people started to make stories of, well, how did this guy have such powerful, have that second sight, right? Well, it must have been that the Queen of Fairies came and took him to the other world and gave him his powers of prophecy. And there's different stories about how that came about, but in our particular version, she takes him to a garden and gives him an apple to eat, and the apple brings him his gifts of prophecy. So this song has traveled for hundreds and hundreds of years in different forms and made its way in at least one little way to North Carolina. This version was collected in North Carolina, maybe 1930s, 1940s, from a woman named Becky Gordon. And to my knowledge, it is the only version of this ballad that survived over here in this country. So very, very shortened version of this story. This is True Thomas. I'll tell you about this instrument in a little bit. True Thomas lay on yonder hill and saw a lady gay, a lady that was bright and fair, come riding down the way, come riding down the way. Her dress was of the grass green silk, her cloak was velvet fine, her horse's bridle silver gay, and dressed in gold so fine, and dressed in gold so fine. She turned her milk-white steed about and took him up behind. And when she spurred her horse's side, they flew on like the wind. They flew on like the wind. And on they rode, and on they rode, till they came to a garden green. Light down, True Tom, the lady said, and pull that fruit for me, and pick that fruit for me. He ate the fruit of that green tree, laid his head on the lady's knee. Stay still, True Tom, the lady said, I'll show you fairies three. I'll show you fairies three. He got him a coat of the velvet cloth and shoes of silver so gay. And 7 long years were past and gone. this way before he returned this way. Thank you. So that song was originally in the Scots language, right? It was originally in a different language, very similar to English. And so we have these little, what we have in the story is a lot of kind of mysterious imagery, right? It's like, what's happening? Who's this lady? What's going on? And that is so typical of the ballad singing tradition. A lot of times, the ways these songs are written are in the third person perspective. So, like, he did this, then she did this, and then he said this, and she said this, right? We're very, we get very little perspective into the inner worlds of the characters. And that makes us really active audience members, right? Because then we get to be asking, well, why did she do that? Why did he do that? What would he have been feeling? We get to place ourselves in the story in a way that's very active. And this is really different than contemporary songwriting, where I might be saying, like, I'm feeling this way, and I'm going to put it into metaphor, and I hope you agree with me. Really different way of presenting a story. And that's something that I think keeps these stories alive, because we are active interpreters and we have a lot of investment in the songs, because of how we place ourselves in them. One kind of cool, neat thing about the fact that this was a Scots song originally. So all these little words, all this vocabulary in the song has shifted into English. But we had this part where the fairy queen says, "Stay still, true Tom, I'll show you fairies three," right? So in Scots, the original word was ferlies, Ferlies, and a ferlie is a wonder, something magical or wondrous. And what she's about to show him in the older versions are three roads, three ferlies. So one road is to heaven, one road is to hell, and one road is to fairyland. And they go to fairyland of those choices. But it's a beautiful example of the kind of the syncretism, right? This combination of people living for so many years, living in these worlds where it's like, well, of course, the fairy world exists, and we are Christian, and both of these worlds come together. But some English speaker at some point heard that song and didn't know what a ferlie was, but knew what a fairy was, and either had a sense or did know that the song was about fairies, and so changed it to fairies. And so we get to keep that magical content in the song, which is really neat. So I'm going to go ahead and ask, and I'd love for people to raise their hands. We'll have a little interactivity. What is a ballad, or what do you think of when you think of ballads? What are we talking about? Yes. Uh-huh.
They were originally printed on broadsides, say 16, and it would say sung to the tune of, like Star Spangled Banner.
Mm-hmm.
So ballads are usually quatrains.
So four lines that rhyme. Yep. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And broadsides are like these one sheets that were printed when printing became cheap and available, and you just reel something out, you'd write it out and say, yeah, to the tune of like this popular drinking song we know, or to this hymn, right? And then people could know how to sing it together. Anybody else? Did you hear from one more person, maybe? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that is like the central defining characteristic, right? Is that these are songs that tell stories. And this is an art form, a form of storytelling that emerged in the Middle Ages, been around a really long time, and was popular across the Mediterranean, across a lot of Europe. And then the reason why I'm even singing these right now is because they were carried by people across the Atlantic, body to body, right, largely through oral tradition, but also through printed material, to this continent, and continued to be sung. So something that is so amazing to me about these songs is the ways that they can be so old, right? Like the one we just heard, like that story goes back 800 years, and fairy lore goes back much older than that, right? But they can be so old, but also feel so immediately relevant, right? They can feel viscerally relevant to people's situations, and that's the only reason why they keep on being sung, right? So I'm going to sing a song for you now that I'm going to have you help me with. This also goes back a long ways, really ancient mythology that I'll tell you about afterwards. And it's about a boar hunt. Oh, there's a fire behind me now. That's nice. Are we cozy? Do we feel cozy? There we go. This is a shruti box. This is a type of harmonium instrument that was developed in India. My understanding is that British colonizers brought a form of harmonium to India. Folks in India developed it into this really amazing instrument used in a lot of subcontinental Indian musical genres. And now I'm using it. So we'll do some, I'll point to me when it's my turn to sing, and then I'll point to you to show you what part you're going to be singing. So I'll go, there's a wild hog in these woods. And then your part is, dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. So try that. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. Yeah, let's do that again. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. Nice. Then we have, there's a wild hog in these woods. Then you have, dill-o-dee. Oh, I love that. I didn't even teach it, and you knew it. Yeah. So we just have dill-o-dee. And then, there's a wild hog in these woods. He'll eat your meat. He'll suck your blood. And here's your part. Come away. Waddle down, Quanzio. Let's do that. Come away, waddle down, Quanzio. Yeah. So you'll get lots of opportunities to say those words. These are nonsense words. They might have had meaning at one point. They don't they didn't at the point that the song was being collected. This song comes to us from two people, Currents and Maggie Hammonds, and actually, Jill, if you could, Jill's going to pass around some photos as we do this. Yeah, those two. Yeah, they're both the same, but this is Maggie Hammonds, just so you can put a face to a name. She was a West Virginia singer, and her family, along with her relative Currents, kept a lot of these songs. So this comes from her. There's a wild hog in these woods. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. There's a wild hog in these woods. Dill-o-dee. There's a wild hog in these woods. He'll eat your meat. He'll suck your blood. Come away. Waddle down, Quanzio. Bingham had him a wooden gun. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. Bingham had him a wooden gun. Dill-o-dee. Bingham had him a wooden gun to shoot the wild boar as he run. Come away, waddle down, Quanzio. And Bingham had him a butcher knife. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. And Bingham had him a butcher knife. Dill-o-dee. And Bingham had him a butcher knife. He swore he'd take that wild boar's life. Come away, waddle down, Quanzio. He tracked that wild boar to his den. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. He tracked that wild boar to his den. Dill-o-dee. He tracked that wild boar to his den. He spied the bones of 1,000 men. Come away, waddle down, Quanzio. He put his horn up to his mouth. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. He put his horn up to his mouth. Dill-o-dee. He put his horn up to his mouth. He blew it east, west, north, and south. Come away, waddle down, Quanzio. That wild boar came with such a dash. Dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. That wild boar came with such a dash. Dill-o-dee. That wild boar came with such a dash. He split the hickory oak the ash, come away, waddle down Quanzio. Then Bingham raised his wooden gun, dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. Then Bingham raised his wooden gun, dill-o-dee. Then Bingham raised his wooden gun. He shot the wild boar as he run. Come away, waddle down Quanzio. Then Bingham raised his butcher knife, dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. Oh, Bingham raised his butcher knife, dill-o-dee. Then Bingham raised his butcher knife. Right there he took that wild boar's life. Come away, waddle down Quanzio. There's a wild hog in these woods, dill-o-dee, dill-o-dee. There's a wild hog in these woods, dill-o-dee. There's a wild hog in these woods, he'll eat your meat, he'll suck your blood. Come away, waddle down Quanzio. Thank you. So I learned this song via a mentor of mine who now lives in Massachusetts, named Michael Klein, who collected this song from Maggie. And I've gotten to watch him and his partner Carrie. They'll go around and they'll go to 4-H camps and stuff and sing songs like this to kids, to students, you know, and talk about old traditions. And this is the song that they use to open a lot of times. And you know, if you've got a bunch of 4th graders in a room who are just messing around and, you know, they're not paying attention, and then you start with that song, he'll eat your meat, he'll suck your blood. By the end of the verse, everyone's like what's happened? What's about to happen? You know, it's like, yes. And you saw me, you know, with these verses, I was doing some hand gestures, right? And that's the way I've altered them some, but this is the way that Michael learned them. And that's one of the many ways that these songs have been carried, and like why they've been carried is that, you know, entertainment is too broad a word, but like you're keeping children occupied, not only yourself, but you're keeping children occupied. And even though there is a tradition of ballad singing that's very, we could say very like, I'm going to use the word demure. Yeah, some people get it here. Okay, that's current meme kind of thing. Anyway, that's like very. There's a ballad tradition, especially in Western North Carolina, where you know, you look down, you're not making eye contact, you're singing the song, you're letting the song have the attention, not yourself. It's a really beautiful thing. But there are other circumstances where people would absolutely have been like trying to make this really entertaining and really big, and especially if you're trying to keep the attention of kids, putting in hand gestures like that, which I've seen many traditional ballad singers do from a few generations back, that's going to be keeping kids in the story, right? So it's also going to keep adults in the story, right? Because if you are I hope it kept everyone here in the story. But if you're, you know, imagining that you're a few hundred years ago, right, and you're living in a cabin, and maybe you're 1st or 2nd generation from somewhere like Scotland or England, in, say, here in Western North Carolina, that story is going to feel really real, right? Because you're out here hunting large animals, including wild boars, European boars that have come over and are now running wild here in this continent, and bears. And you yourself are going to be a little more vulnerable as a prey animal yourself, right? Folks coming over from Europe, so many of these large predators had been extinct for hundreds of years. They weren't around anymore. Wolves, like if you lived in England, wolves were legendary. No one would have seen a wolf for hundreds of years. But you come over here and there are wolves and there are cougars. There are animals that are going to hunt you. And that's a different experience. And so a song like this is going to feel immediate to your situation, even though the story is 1,000 years old, right? And that's how the song keeps being sung. Um, so this song goes back to Welsh mythology, and actually what might be it's the earliest known mention of the character of King Arthur as well. So I apologize to anyone here who speaks Welsh because I'm going to mess up some of this pronunciation, but this story is this is tied to a story known as like the story of Culhwch and Olwen. And in this story, Culhwch, our hero, wants to marry this woman Olwen, but the problem is that she has a father, this giant, this ogre named Ysbyddaden. And Ysbyddaden says, okay, sure, you can marry my daughter as long as you go and, complete the series of impossible tasks. And one of those tasks is to hunt down a giant boar and his 7 deadly piglets who have been ravaging the countryside and killing Christian men. So Culhwch goes out and employs the help of his cousin Arthur and many other men to eventually drive this boar into the sea. And it's a big epic story, really long story, but it got brought over. And versions of this story have been sung all over the eastern seaboard, including in West Virginia, where we get this really kind of distilled version that is so powerful in its distillation, right? That's maybe 7 or 8 verses, and like every single one has such weight to it, right? So some of the ways that these songs continue to be relevant is that we do change some of the details to fit the new circumstances. So I want to sing a song for you that has made some little changes just to demonstrate that. And Jill, if you could pass around a few more, those next 2. Jill is passing around a photo of this gentleman, Lee Monroe Presnell, or Lee Monroe Presley. He spent a great deal of his life on Beech Mountain, North Carolina. So I see I see nods. Yeah, people know where that is, right? So if you've been near, it's Beech Mountain is near Boone, for folks who've been to Boone, and sits on the border of Avery and Watauga counties, north of us. So there was a really vibrant ballad singing community up there, including songs that Lee held, and he's an amazing singer. So I'm going to sing one of his called "I Went to See My Molly," and this is probably the shortest ballad you'll ever hear. It's like maybe 3 verses, so pay attention. It'll be over before you know it. Actually, I will pitch myself just to make sure here. I went to see my Molly, all in her bloom of youth. I went to see my Molly, that she might understand. I'm going to join an army to fight a Yankee band. Don't say so, dear Johnny, those words will break my heart. Come, let's once get married, and that before we part. Said, don't go back there, Johnny, be kind and marry me. These long yellow locks all cut off and men clothing put on. I'll follow you, dear Johnny, wherever you may be. I'll fear no death, no danger, though great the danger be. Said, don't go back there, Johnny, be kind and marry me. So can someone tell me what's going on in this story or what you perceive is going on in this story? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have this gentleman who's gonna go fight. It's the Civil War, seemingly, right? He's gonna go fight a Yankee band, right? And we know, like, a lot of us know our like really Western North Carolina history, but Southern Appalachia in general was such a hot conflict zone for the Civil War because you had armies from both sides going through your backyard, People within families were fighting on different sides, right? Yeah, so there's a long memory of that here, like a very visceral long memory of that. So he's going to go off and fight the Yankees. And what is she saying in response? What was that? Sorry. Stay home and marry me. What else is she suggesting? Yeah. Right, right. I'll go with you and I'll be a soldier, right? So this is a song, right? We're singing about, in the context that Lee is singing it, he's singing about the Civil War. But we know that this song goes back several hundred years to England, and probably is about the Napoleonic Wars in origin. And one thing that we have continuity around is the fact that there's this really popular songwriting genre of balladry about women um, dressing up and living as men, living as sailors and soldiers in all these songs. And often, but not always, it is to rescue a sweetheart who's maybe been pressed, like forced into the Navy or like made to go to the wars. Um, and that also happened in the Civil War, right? Like and people knew that was happening at the time, people knew it was happening afterwards. And so we have this continuity of that happening in both circumstances, but we've tweaked it. Like at some point, if it was clear that this was about the Napoleonic Wars, someone was like, well, I'm fighting the Civil War. So I'm going to make this is about my experience. And something really amazing that happens with these songs is that they become part of like communal and familial memory. Even if the song is really old and might in origin be about something way in the past, people remember the songs as originating in their communities or being about their families. So there are many times I've heard people in source recordings and stuff saying like, oh, like, and I might know that the song is really old, right? But they're saying, well, like, oh yeah, my grandmother wrote that, or like this happened to my uncle and then he wrote a song about it. And so like the songs come to have their own immediacy and place in the communities where they're being carried. And so it doesn't really matter how old this particular song is. It's engaging. It's helping Lee's community or that family or his family remember the Civil War and like remember their personal experiences. So speaking of familial memory, I'm gonna sing a song for you that was written here, by here I mean in southern Appalachia, by a guy named Abner Vance. Abner was born in 1760 in North Carolina. He fought in the Revolutionary War. He went on to be a preacher. He was a hunter. And he lived a great deal of his adult life in Virginia, in Southwest Virginia. And in about 1817, he killed someone. He killed a man named Lewis Horton. Lewis and his brother Daniel, one of them, a lot of this is muddy and unclear at this point, had some kind of relationship with Abner's daughter. Abner was unhappy about that. And he went and shot Lewis Horton off his horse on the banks of the Sandy River. He might have been aiming for Daniel. We don't know. People argue about these things in niche circles. So he's taken to trial and he's executed. He's hung. And before he died, at least I believe, he wrote this song. He wrote this song about his situation, about the land he was going to miss, and about how he felt about feeling kind of targeted by his community for what he had done. So you're going to hear mention of the Sandy River, and then also Clinch's Hill, and that's a reference to Clinch Mountain in Virginia, long, long ridgeline that kind of makes up the backbone of Virginia. Oh, we're in the same place. Okay. Green are the woods where Sandy flows, and peace it dwelleth there. Starting it too low. Yeah. Green are the woods where Sandy flows, and peace it dwelleth there. In the valley the bear they lie secure, the redbuck roams the hills. But bands no more shall Sandy behold, nor drink its crystal waves. The partial judge has confirmed his doom, the hunter has found his grave. My persecutors have gained their request, as oft they said they would. They ofttimes swore they never would rest till they gained my heart's blood. But they and I together must meet where all things are unknown. And if I've shed the innocent blood, I hope there's mercy shown. The sun shines bright on Clinch's hill, and soft the west wind blows. The valley is covered all over in bloom, perfumed by the red rose. But bands no more shall Sandy behold, nor smell its sweet perfumes. Today his eyes are closed in death, his body confined in the tomb. Farewell, my friends and children dear, to you I bid farewell. The love I have for your precious souls, no human tongue can tell. Farewell to you, my loving wife, to you I bid adieu. And if I reach fair Canaan shore, I hope to meet with you. But bands no more shall Sandy behold, nor drink its crystal waves. The partial judge has confirmed his doom, the hunter has found his grave. But bands no more shall Sandy behold, nor smell its sweet perfumes. Today his eyes are closed in death, his body confined in the tomb. Thank you. So I was maybe about 8 years ago was having work done on my car at a mechanic shop that used to be in downtown Asheville called Tony's Garage. And I was, about to pay my bill, and the mechanic started talking about, we just started talking about family, and and he was like, "Oh, well, I'm a Vance," and then he's like, "And I have this great grandfather who was hung back in Virginia back in the 1800s," and I was like, was his name Abner Vance? And he was like, "Well, yeah," and I was like, "Do you know that he wrote a song about before he died?" And he was like, "No, he didn't know," and so I got to sit there with him and sing this song to him that his great grandfather had written. And it was such an amazing moment to think about the ways that these stories carry. And even if that story had not continued, probably was in the family for a while, but had it maybe some point stopped, it had just continued to spread, right? Like just the stream of song. It continued an oral tradition in a pretty unbroken way. And so I got to sing it back to him. And afterwards, he paused and he was quiet and he was like, "Wow." He's like, "I feel like I shouldn't charge you for that." Yeah. He did charge me anyway, but it was, it's worth a shot. So that kind of ballad that Abner Vance wrote is what would be called like a hangman's ballad. And so this is a tradition that goes back to England, when public executions were a lot more common in our culture. And what would happen, especially right with the advent of broadsides and printing material, making it so easy, people would write out songs. Like if someone was going to get executed, someone would write out a song from the perspective of the accused, saying like, "Oh, I did this thing, and I regret that I did it, and you all out there don't do what I did," and it's kind of moralizing story. And it would be sold at the execution for some money, right? This is the deal, yeah. And these what would happen in the oral tradition is that like then it would become this thing of like, oh, this person sang this song from the gallows before they died, right? And we have all kinds of stories like that in ballad traditions in this country. So that's one of the stories around Abner. But what I think is special is that in most cases in these hangman's ballads, the person who the accused isn't really getting to speak for themselves. Someone else has written the story. Someone else has written the song. But in the case of this song, I really do believe it's so personal. And there's other verses that I didn't even get into that are very personal to his community and the people he feels have not supported him. And I really believe that he wrote this song. And it's a really special thing that we have it. So ballads have been used quite a bit to teach morality, right? And that includes teaching morality around what women should and should not do. And I think many of us have probably heard of murder ballads before. And these stories, I think, are more properly often should be called femicide ballads because they're often about women being murdered by men, usually because they're pregnant, even though in American versions that element is not always clear. We're too modest and we don't, in our Protestant culture, to mention that that's what's going on. But again, these stories change with the singers and they change with the culture. And so I'm going to sing you a song that has been changed over time to go from a position of a woman being punished for expressing freedom to a woman rewarding herself for expressing freedom. So this song came from a man named Dan Wilder, who lived in eastern Kentucky, and it's called Marching Away with the Spaniards. Pretty little miss came tripping downstairs, pulling off her slippers, putting on her high-heeled shoe to go marching away with the Spaniards. Late that night her father came home, inquiring for his daughter. The only words that he could hear, well, she's gone across the water. Well, go catch out my good gray steed. The brown one's not so speedy. I'll ride the length of a long summer's day, and I'll overtake my lady. He rode out to the close of day, till he come to a span of water, and he looked out on the other side, and it's there he spied his daughter. Won't you come to me, my pretty fair miss? Won't you come to me, my honey? I'll mount you on some high hillside where the Spaniards can't get near you. How can you leave your house and home and your dear old mother? How can you forsake those two little babes to go marching away with the Spaniards? Oh, I can leave my house and home and my dear old mother, and I can forsake those two little babes and go marching away with the Spaniards. I'll take off these blue Scotch gloves, all rode in Spanish leathers, and I'll give to you my lily white hand, and we'll bid farewell forever. That's it. So this song was originally from Scotland. It has gone by many, many names. Sometimes it's called, in this country, called Blackjack Davy. And it is originally about a woman who runs away, a wife who runs away from her lord and runs off with a group of Roma people or travelers. And usually, in the older versions of the story, the Lord comes after her, he takes her back, and usually the travelers are punished in some sort of severe way, right? It's a sad, what we would, really call a sad ending, right? But as this song has traveled, we get, and especially as we move into the 20th century, we get more and more versions where the woman successfully runs away with the people she wants to be with, right? And often she's running away with a specific person, this Blackjack Davy, someone who's stolen her heart, right? And in this version, this really special version from Eastern Kentucky, it's not a wife anymore. It's a young woman. It's the daughter of the household who's run off. I don't know why they're Spaniards. I have no idea. But they sound like fun. They sound like a fun bunch. I think that's why she left. But another way that these, there are conversations in cultures where people really like love to sing these songs about like what songs do we sing and what songs maybe do we choose not to sing because maybe in a contemporary context they feel hurtful or they feel um, yeah, they might feel hurtful to people in the audience, right? And I think there's a lot of wisdom in saying like, well, like we have a lot of these songs, we know they exist. A lot of them can be in archives, we can study them, but this is a living tradition. Like I am singing this song to you. The song is alive. It is coming through me, and it is touching us as in our contemporary context. And so some of these songs keep going because someone along the way was like, I don't like that she goes back, and it's fine if it's real to you that she, it's more important to you, it's a more realistic story that she does go back. That's also relevant, right? But that's what oral tradition is about, is that we use these songs for personal expression, and people want this woman to get what she wants, and so she does. And I love that. So these songs have definitely been used in all kinds of political contexts as well. Ballads have always been political. Um, Ballads have been used in election years. They've been used during wars, right? They promote particular people and parties. And they've also been used in times of labor organizing and union organizing. And so I wanted to share a song with y'all that I'd like you to help me sing by a woman named Ella Mae Wiggins. So we have some photos of her to share as well. Ella Mae grew up in eastern Tennessee. She on a farm, and her family. She was born in 1900, and her family decided to try some other work, and so she worked in logging camps as a laundress in North Carolina when she was a teenager. And then by 1929, she was living in Gastonia, North Carolina, working in one of the many textile mills that were just covering the region then, covering the Piedmont up into Virginia, down into Georgia. All these mills, the textile industry had moved down from New England in the decades prior, really to take advantage of, because they thought they could pay Southerners less, and they thought Southerners weren't going to organize, and so to unionize. And so in 1929, Ella Mae is working 6 days a week, 12-hour work days. She has multiple children. Sometimes she's making less than $5 a week. She's lost some of her children because she wasn't able to take care of them and buy the medicine they needed because of her work conditions. So the National Textile Workers Union shows up and starts organizing some of the mills, and she becomes a union organizer. And so she starts to write songs that she sings at rallies based off of old ballads about her situation. These are what we could think of as like kind of testimonial ballads, like come around, people, and listen to my story, right? And this is my experience, and I'm daring you to witness this experience. So she wrote this ballad called Mill Mother's Lament, and I put a new tune to it and took one of the verses and made it a chorus so we could sing it in groups. So that's what we're gonna do right now. I just, for a little, we'll sing it, and then I can sing you a little bit of how it originally sounded. But we don't have her voice. We know she had this nice low alto voice. We don't have a recording of her, but she based this one off of another ballad she knew, and it became a rallying song. So here's your part. Let me find my pitch again here. So. But understand all workers. Sing that with me. But understand all workers. Our union they do fear. Our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. And have a union here. Yeah, okay. So we'll go over that a little bit. I have a lavalier mic. I was planning on clapping for this, but I'm not sure if it'll be noisy. Let me try it. Okay. If I see you wincing or something. Okay. So we have, but understand all workers, our union they do fear. Let's do that. But understand all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. Cool, here we go. We leave our homes in the morning, we kiss our children goodbye. While we slave for the bosses, our children scream and cry. Here we go. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. And when we draw our money, our grocery bills to pay, not a cent to spend for clothing, not a cent to lay away. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. And when at home in the evening our little ones do say, we need some shoes, dear mother, our feet were cold today. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. It grieves the heart of the mother, you everyone must know. When we can't do for children, our wages are too low. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. It is for our little children that seem to us so dear. But for us nor them, dear workers, the bosses do not care. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. Nice, thank you. Thank you. So, like concurrent to these strikes and these attempts to unionize the textile mills in southern Appalachia, we had our own labor struggles happening, especially in the coal fields. So, you know, the story would usually go something like the miners in a local coal camp would want to unionize. They'd put forward a contract. The owners would refuse, and then the miners would go out on strike and start to picket. The owners would bring in private militia or bring in state police, and these wars, essentially these small civil wars, took place. It's a really big part of our nation's history that not enough people know about. And of course, people were writing songs, were taking the ballad traditions they were familiar with, and were turning them into songs about their lives and about their struggles in these conflicts. So I'm going to sing you a song from a woman named Saro Gunning. We have photos of her as well. Sarah was born in 1910, I believe, and grew up in eastern Kentucky, and really saw some of the worst, really experienced some of the worst conditions of the Depression era coal camps. She also, like LMA, lost children to malnutrition. She had a husband who eventually died from tuberculosis that he contracted in the mines. And people were literally starving in the late 1920s, and trying to get better wages and having just a lot of trouble even going to work. You might have access to the mines one day a week because demand was so low and management was withholding and all of that. So she wrote this song called "Come All You Coal Miners." Once again, in this kind of testimonial. If you ever heard some, I hear this a lot in Irish ballads where it's like, "Good people gather round and listen to my sad story." Right? It's that tradition passed on over here, and so this song begins with a calling in of like, "Listen to me," So here's all you coal miners. Come all you coal miners, wherever you may be, and listen to a story that I'll relate to thee. My name is nothing extra, but the truth to you I'll tell. I am a coal miner's wife. I'm sure I wish you well. I was born in old Kentucky in a coal camp, born and bred. I know all about those pinto beans, bulldog gravy, and cornbread. I've seen the workers slave and toil in the coal mines every day for $1 in the company store, for that is all they pay. Coal mining is the most dangerous work done in this land today, with many a dirty slaving condition and very little pay. Coal miner, won't you wake up and open your eyes and see what this dirty capitalist system is doing to you and me? They take away your lifeblood, take away your children's lives, take fathers away from children and husbands away from wives. Coal miner, won't you organize wherever you may be? And make this a land of freedom for workers like you and me. Coal miner, they will work you till you can't work no more. And what do you get for your living but $1 in the company store? A broken down shack to live in, rain and snow pours in the top. Oh, you have to pay that company rent. Your paying never stops. Well, I am a coal miner's wife. I'm sure I wish you well. Let's sink this dirty capitalist system to the darkest pits of hell. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, got a few more for y'all. Since we're coming into Halloween season, not that these songs weren't already sad enough, but I'm gonna sing you another one that's spooky as well as sad. You know, the songs change, the meanings of the songs change with the people who are singing them. We've, been talking about that this evening. These songs often carried old folklore and old lessons in them that people continued to practice and keep in mind in this country in all kinds of ways. And this song is one that comes from Scotland and was sung by a woman. The version I learned comes from a woman named Texas Gladden, who grew up in Virginia. And this lesson of this song is not to grieve for too long. And this goes back to old European folklore. We hear this kind of wisdom in Grimm's fairy tales as well. And so the circumstances of this story are that there's a mother who sends her children away to learn their grammar, to go to school, and they die while they're away, while they're traveling. And so on Christmas, in our version, it's on at Christmas, her children return to her. And older versions of the story, it would have been at Martinmas time, which is much closer to Halloween, so kind of more like fall. And these are times, both Christmas and at Martinmas, these are times when there is considered to be traditionally more kind of liminality. There's more looseness between the world of the dead and the world of the living. And her children return as revenants. Nowadays, when we, in our folklore, right, when the dead return, they return as ghosts. But in these old stories, it was physically the bodies of the dead coming back to visit the living. In these old stories, that's what's happening. And so they return, and she's like, oh, my children are back. And she makes them a meal. She wants them to stay. And what they're there to tell her is, like, we need you to stop mourning for us, because your tears are coming down into our grave and they're wetting our burial shroud. That was this belief that's like, if you cried and mourned for too long, the dead couldn't rest. And so it's this lesson about, please, we have to take care of ourselves as the living, right? And in doing that, it also allows the dead to rest. So this is The Three Little Babes. There was a knight and a lady bright, and 3 little babes had she. She sent them away to a far country to learn their grammary. They hadn't been gone but a very short time, about 6 months and a day, when death, cruel death, came hastening on and stole those babes away. It was on a cold, dark Christmas time, when everything was still. She saw her 3 little babes come running o'er the hill. She made them a table of bread and wine, that they might drink and eat. She made them a bed, a winding sheet, that they might sleep so sweet. Take it off, said the eldest one. Take it off, cried she. I can't stay here in this wide, wicked world, for there's a better one for me. Cold clouds down at my side, cold clouds down at my feet. The tears my dear mother shed for me would wet my winding sheet. So I'm going to just wrap up with one more song, and then I'm happy to stick around if folks have questions and want to talk about ballads some more. I'm happy to do that. I wanted to end on a happier note. This is not a ballad, thus it is happier. I want to end with a Baptist song. I meant to mention earlier, this is a segue that I planned. So these songs, I'm calling them ballads, and that name has been used by academics for a long time, but it's now just a really common term for these kinds of songs. And it actually comes from a French word, the root of which means to dance, which is interesting, right? Because these songs actually used to be danced to. Am I still on? Okay. These songs used to be danced to. And they still are in very few places, like in the Faroe Islands and in Scandinavia. People will still do circle dances to ballads. And you have one caller, like someone like me, who's singing, but there's some refrain that other people can sing along to, and you do it in time. And so it's very different than the way that these songs passed over here. We're like, I'm hardly using any rhythm at all with most of these songs, right? We're just like enjoying the story without a set rhythm, especially because we're singing a cappella. But these did used to be danced to. But here in Western North Carolina, these songs were often called love songs. And that was to distinguish them from the church songs. It's sort of like, well, these are the secular songs. There's the love songs and there's the church songs. A lot of people just called them the old songs because they could tell they were old. They didn't know how old, right? But they're like, yeah, they're the old ones that we keep singing. So we're going to do a church song instead of a love song. This one comes from Baptist traditions that would be sung at the end of a meeting. It's called Land on the Shore. There's a lot of different versions of it out there. Every time I hear it, people sing it a little differently. And so I'm going to teach you your part. So I'm having trouble finding the pitch this time. I'll sing the first verse and then I'll teach you the chorus. Brethren, now our meeting is over. Brethren, we must part. And if I never see you anymore, I'll love you in my heart. Here's the chorus. We'll do some call and response. And we'll land on the shore. Let's do that. And we'll land on the shore. 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 Same as the first line. And we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. And be safe forevermore. So when I learned this song, I learned it as safe. And then later on, I was like, nah, it must have been saved forevermore. So you sing it the way you want to sing it. I'll just keep going. You catch on to the verses too. They're very repetitive. You can do that too. So, sisters, now our meeting is over. Sisters, we must part. And if I never see you anymore, I'll love you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. Oh, brothers, now our meeting is over. Brothers, we must part. And if I never see you anymore, I'll love you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore. And be safe forevermore. Oh, fathers, now our meeting is over. Fathers, we must part. And if I never see you anymore, I'll love you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. Oh, neighbors, now our meeting is over. Neighbors, we must part. And if I never see you anymore, I'll love you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore. And we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sure. So you are released. You are free. But I'm happy to do a little Q&A if anyone has any questions. Before we go. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. 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 So a lot of these melodies are, so maybe conversation can happen outside because this is a really resonant space. So yeah, quiet. I'm. We're having quiet in here. Sorry, it's okay. It's just a really resonant space, so it's easy. But yeah, it's all good. So you were asking about the melodies. Yeah, the melodies are a lot of them are very modal, very minor. Um, you had major melodies as well. I feel like what's kind of more like most of these songs, these melodies were created before standardization of Western music. And so all the scale structures that we're used to now, you know, you did have more like modal scale structures that were more common in the Middle Ages, right? But in general, you know, people were, there were all kinds of notes that you could throw in that today we're like, oh, why is that in there? Right. But we're just happening in these melodies because nothing had been like put in concretely. And that's something I really love about these. Um, I use a lot of ornamentation in my singing. It really depended on the community how much ornamentation was being done with these songs. Some of that ornamentation, that tradition certainly comes from Ireland and comes from like Gaelic parts of Scotland. So the you know when I sang I went to see my Molly, like I went to see my Molly that she might understand. Like all these little jumps, right? That's ornamentation. And that was a song by Lee Monroe Presnell. Presnell was or Presley was a Baptist preacher, and he sang in a tradition called lining out singing. And lining out singing is a really it's super rare now, where it's done in a lot of African American communities and in some white Baptist communities. And it's this ornamented way of singing that people would do together in church. And it came from a time from the Protestant Reformation when folks were like, okay, we want to sing together now, but like choirs don't exist yet, people don't read music. How do we get people to sing together? And so you'd have someone called the presenter who would like sing out a line, maybe from like the Book of Psalms, and everyone would sing back to melodies that they're familiar with. Um, and it was super duper ornamented. And that tradition passed over here, and I think passed into ballad singing in the way that like Lee Monroe is singing it. And I mostly sing in his style. Like I'm mostly drawing from him. So I'm singing this really ornamented style that certainly would have come from Scotland, would have come from Ireland. Not my impression is not so much from England, but you of course had plenty of singers who were singing in a much more straightforward way, who weren't adding a lot of those ornaments. One thing you will hear a lot is what's called like the flip or the vocal break that I'm doing a lot of, which is like a now that I have to call it in, I'm like, can I do it? But it's like the hey, right? Like that sound is a natural break that happens in everyone's range somewhere. It is different for everybody. Sometimes you can have multiple breaks as well. It's just this moment when you're moving from high to low that your vocal cords want to do this little flip. And traditional singing cultures around the world use these quite a bit. We hear it a lot in yodeling, right? But it gets trained out of us in Western singing. We are very much not supposed to do that flip. And so some people who've been really classically trained feel like they can't even do it. They're like, it's not there for me. It's gone. So people consciously do it in a stylized way now in like country music and bluegrass, but it is very common in traditional singing because it's something that just naturally happens with your voice. It just happens. And so people made it a part of their singing. Yeah.
Anything to do with shape?
Like does what ballads or like
The kind of ornamental.
oh, that's a great question. I'm not shape note singing has been around since the colonial period. Really, another amazing form of hymnody that developed in this country, but it was in its nationcy was like from England. I don't know that they have too much of a relationship with each other because shape note was about like we are going to like create written hymn music in 3 and 4 part harmonies. Certainly, a lot of the tunes are related to each other. Absolutely, like you find tunes in shape note that you would hear people singing in ballads or in other religious contexts. That's a good question. Mm-hmm.
So follow on to that, in terms of harmonies, what we're singing here with you tonight
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have a real strong sense of harmony. Some of we all have different pitches to our voices. Does that, in a group setting, add a sense of harmony to the style of music?
Sorry, I want to.
Well,
could you ask that again?
your
Like,
voice
Mhm.
someone who might be a bass or a baritone versus
Mhm.
an alto or a
Mhm.
soprano in our traditional Western music.
Right.
This mode of singing,
Mhm.
those ranges would be different, although the notes would be the same.
Right.
Does that add a richness to it, or a group sense of almost the harmony that the shape notes were designed to create for people who don't read music? Was there
Mhm.
experimentation?
Right.
Did people improvise instead of saying, and that may be another way to
Yeah, I mean, people absolutely would have been improvising, and the context would have been like so different than the like sort of like writing for a particular ranges. And oftentimes, yeah, like a lot of the songs I'm singing have a really wide range to them. Um, so um, you know, the way people would have been singing these songs so often, sometimes in group context for sure, but usually solo. And so people are going to be choosing where it is in their range that makes sense for them. Um, and it's so often it's, you know, I'm standing here performing for y'all, but the utility of these songs was so often much like I'm just singing for myself. I'm out here like shucking corn and I've got to stay entertained for 2 hours, you know? Um, and so it's it's really what fit the moment. And people did experiment, people did change consciously and unconsciously, um, because it was more about the utility and not about sticking with exactly how you had learned it. I don't know that I'm totally answering your question, but I'd love to talk about it more. Yeah, let's one more question. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when I see Jewel perform, that's a good
Sorry,
Jewel.
Jewel.
Her name is Jewel. Solo singer.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah.
And she has a lot of yodels.
Yeah.
And talks about how she grew up using the yodel as
Mm-hmm.
her
Mm-hmm.
but listening to you talking about the union reminded me of Norma Ray.
Mm.
How tough that was.
Mm-hmm. And continues to be. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these songs continue to have a lot of relevance. Yeah. Hey, did you want to close us or anything?
Yeah,
I couldn't tell.
That's the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do a little commercial for upcoming programs. So next month on October 3rd, we're going to have Becky Stone and her husband Pat. If you don't know her, she's a local storyteller, actress, and Chautauqua scholar. And she is going to do a storytelling program on Southern folk tales that you've probably never heard.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want to go.
And in November, on November 7th, we're going to have a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Her name is Nancy Pheasant, and she is going to do traditional Cherokee tales. And that's also a Wilma Dyken Legacy sponsored program. And then on December 5th, there's going to be local amateur tellers, pro-am tellers, who are going to do international folk and fairy tales and tall tales. So keep your eyes peeled for those. And thank you for coming. And please thank Saro again. That was just incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.